I thought my life was perfect. Then one small piece of paper changed everything. My name is Maya, and for years I believed in love, in loyalty, and in the promises I made on my wedding day. My husband Daniel and I had been married for 8 years. We lived in a cozy little house on a quiet street, and our life together was simple. But to me, it was enough. I was 29, Daniel was 33. He worked at an accounting firm downtown. On my birthday, he never forgot the flowers. Every night we sat on the couch and talked about our day. I loved him with everything in me. I truly believed we were happy. But then, slowly, things began to shift. About 4 months ago, Daniel started staying late at the office. He'd call and say there was a deadline, a client meeting, too much on his plate. At first, I didn't question it. He was my husband. I trusted him completely. I kept doing what I always did, cooking dinner, keeping the house tidy, waiting up for him no matter how late he came home. But the late nights became a pattern. He'd walk through the door exhausted, barely speaking. When I asked about his day, he'd mutter something about stress and fall asleep within minutes. I would lie awake next to him, feeling lonelier than I'd ever felt in my own home. Then, one Tuesday evening, while I was doing the laundry, I picked up his jacket from the hamper. It felt heavier than it should have. I checked the pockets and found a receipt. My chest tightened instantly. It was from a hotel downtown. I looked at the date. It was from the previous Wednesday, the exact night he told me he was working late. My thoughts spiraled. Maybe it was a work retreat. I told myself maybe his company had booked rooms for a conference. But the details on the receipt told a different story. The room was booked for 2 guests. It included room service, 2 dinners, and 2 glasses of wine. My heart shattered right there in the laundry room. I sat down on the cold floor, holding that piece of paper like it might explain itself. Who was she? Why was he lying? Was she younger? Prettier? Did he love her? I slipped the receipt back into his pocket. I wasn't ready to face him. Not yet. That night, Daniel came home and acted like nothing was wrong. Once he fell asleep, I picked up his phone. His password was still our wedding date, the same date that used to mean everything to both of us. My hands were shaking as I opened his messages, and there it was. A name I'd never heard before, Jessica. The messages were constant, every single day. He'd write, "I miss you already." She'd reply, "Can't wait to see you tonight." My hands trembled harder as I kept scrolling. One message read, "Last Wednesday was incredible." Tears blurred my vision. That night at the hotel had been real. Daniel had been with another woman. He had said the same words to her that he once whispered to me. "I love you," he wrote. My heart broke into pieces I didn't know a heart could break into. The man I trusted, the man I built a life with, had been living an entire second life I knew nothing about. The next morning, my eyes were swollen from crying all night. When Daniel saw my face, he knew something was wrong. He asked if I was okay. I said nothing. Instead, I slid the hotel receipt across the kitchen table. He looked down at it, and his face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Then I asked quietly, "Who is Jessica?" He lowered his head and finally whispered, "Maya, can I explain?" But I was already broken. I wouldn't let him hide behind silence anymore. He claimed Jessica was just a friend. I looked at him in disbelief. "You took a friend to a hotel and told her you loved her? I saw the messages, Daniel. I know everything." He whispered that he was sorry, that he never meant to hurt me. I told him he'd been lying for months, that he'd shattered every ounce of trust I had left. He stood there in silence, and finally, tears filled his eyes. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Wasn't I enough for you?" He looked me in the eyes and said, "It wasn't about you. I felt bored. Every day felt the same. Jessica was new, exciting." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He called it a mistake, said it didn't mean anything, but how could it mean nothing after all those messages, after all those lies? I stood up and told him, "I want you to leave." He begged me not to end things. He promised to cut off all contact with Jessica. He said he still loved me, but I shook my head. "Love isn't secrets," I told him. "Love is trust. You destroyed that. Please go." He looked at me one last time, grabbed his coat, and walked out the door. I sank to the kitchen floor and cried until there were no tears left. The house felt hollow, unbearably quiet. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I stopped answering my friends' calls. My marriage had collapsed in on itself. Every day, Daniel texted me. He said he'd ended it with Jessica for good. He said he wanted to fix everything. He said he missed me. I never replied. My heart was a tangle of grief and confusion. Part of me hated him. Another part of me still loved the man I married. I couldn't erase what happened, but I couldn't erase my love either. The days crawled by. The nights felt cold. Healing seemed impossible. One Saturday, I was at the grocery store when I heard someone call my name. It was Daniel. He looked thinner. His eyes were tired, heavy with something like regret. He asked how I was doing. I told him I was fine, even though it was a lie. We stood there in silence for a moment. We were still legally married, yet we felt like strangers. He asked if we could talk. Just talk, not about the affair, just like the old days. I said yes. We talked for an hour. It felt strange and familiar all at once. We even laughed once. For a brief second, I forgot all the pain. That simple conversation reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. We hadn't just been husband and wife. We had been best friends. I remembered the man who used to make me laugh until I cried, who held me when things fell apart. I decided not to rush anything. We started talking again. Just phone calls at first. Daniel never pushed. He was patient. He told me he was changing, and slowly I could see it. We learned how to talk to each other again, piece by piece. I shared my pain. He listened. He shared his fears. I listened. Something began to shift, slowly. So slowly. I still carried the weight of what happened, but I also felt something else growing underneath it. Healing. Daniel owned his mistake again and again. He never blamed me for any of it. He took full responsibility. He said he'd lost himself and made a terrible choice, but he was fighting to become someone better. I saw the change in him. He was more open, more honest. And I had changed too. I was stronger now. I'd learned I could live without him, but I didn't want to. Not if he was willing to be real, to be faithful, to try again. I wanted my best friend back. One quiet evening, Daniel asked, "Can I come home, Maya?" I looked at him. Part of me still feared he could hurt me again, but another part of me saw the honest, changed man standing in front of me. I thought about the love we once shared, the bond we once had. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "You can come home." From that day on, things weren't perfect, but they became real. Daniel kept his word. He told me where he was every single day. No more secrets, no more lies. It was a new beginning. Now, when I look back, I see a story full of pain, but also full of strength. The affair was never my fault. Daniel made that choice. But we had both stopped fighting for our marriage long before it happened. Now we were learning again, learning to care, to communicate, to love with honesty. Life wasn't easy, but it was real. Every day was a choice. Every moment was a step toward trust. I still carry scars, but I also carry hope. My story isn't about betrayal anymore. It's about healing. I believe healing takes courage. It takes patience. It takes two people willing to look at their broken pieces and say, "We can rebuild this." I don't forget what happened, but I don't let it control my future either. My love was tested in the worst possible way, but it came back stronger. Now I understand something powerful. You can forgive. You can move forward. You can choose to love again. It won't be easy. It won't be fast, but it can be real. You just have to take that first brave step. If this story touched something in you, know that you're not alone. This isn't just my story. It belongs to everyone who's ever been hurt, who's ever fallen apart, and who's ever wanted to heal. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose heart you might reach. And remember, even after the darkest nights, the sun rises again. You can rise again too. Keep going. You are stronger than you think, and you deserve a love that is honest, deep, and true.